everybody. Hi. So we are starting our second session of the conference, which is on fisheries. If I can just remind everyone to put their mobile phones on silent. I think a few of us have forgotten. And yes, our first talk is going to be Bycatch and seine fishery, from beachcast to identified cause, and it's by Signe Christensen-Dalsgaard from the Norwegian Institute for Nature Research. So thank you.
Okay, it was really nice to see all of you in person. Today I will be talking a bit about our own CSI mystery from Norway, which was a quite interesting project. As with all these special victim investigations, you have this team of weird people doing things together. And don't tell my co-authors that they were like that, but I got together a really nice transdisciplinary team for this project, so I'd like to acknowledge the co-authors on this project. Our story starts in the northern part of Norway, in the islands just out of Tromsø. This is a really high productive areas with fjords and sounds. And in the winter, you have the polar night from November to January. So the sun doesn't rise above the horizon. So I'll have quite a bit of photos from the dark here. In the winter 2011-2012, there was quite an interesting phenomena that happened in this area. A lot of spring-spawning herring started entering the fjords. This species is a migratory species, so they can move overwintering areas from area to area. So in Norway, we've seen them further south in Norway, and then they went away for a period. And then in 2011-2012, they entered the fjords in this area outside of Tromsø. And this means that a humongous amount of herring enters the fjords, which gives you a large amount of biomass in a very restricted area. And of course, this attracts the top predators. I mean, it's a feeding frenzy like you haven't seen before. So there's a lot of top predators like seabirds. You've got whales coming in, the large whales. You've got a lot of tourists, and you have got a lot of fishing vessels targeting these this herring. So, I mean, for a couple of years, this was fantastic. I mean, you had the tourists going there, you had whales. It's absolutely beautiful. Then in 2015, suddenly, we got thrown in our face that there was 200 birds, dead birds, gulls, large gulls, that drifted ashore in one of these fjords outside of Tromsø. And this caught the public attention. I mean, you have these birds, it's in the recreation area for people, so they go on a Sunday walk, and suddenly you have like hundreds of gulls lying dead on the beach. And there was quite a lot of speculation on the cause for this die-off. I mean, we look at die-offs, and it can have a lot of different causes, so there's a speculation on this. I mean, one thing was the fishery bycatch, of course. You have this activity outside the fjords. It could also be bycatch in aquaculture. It could be starvation. It could be toxins. So there's a lot of things that could actually be driving this thing. And we weren't sure, to be honest. People thought about this fishery bycatch thing, that it was probably likely that it could be connected to that. And that's related to the fact that, I mean, there was an active fishery going on in that period of the time, and it attracts a lot of seabirds. So, I mean, yeah, if you put things together, it was logic that it could be that. But at least for Norway, the seine fishery, sorry, I should have mentioned that, this herring is caught with seine, so you have these nets going around the shoal of fish that you drag together, lie it back, and then you pump up the fish. And from previously, we haven't thought that this was actually a big bycatch issue. We've been working on the topic for some years, and it's not really a big problem as it seemed before this. So we were really hesitant to draw any conclusions on it. And to be honest, we were caught a bit off guard. I mean, we didn't know what to do with these birds, and we weren't good enough of sampling this. So a couple of years went, and we had a bit of focus on the area. And then again in 2017, in January, in the dock, this mass mortality hit again. This time it was also in the same area, and it was about 1,000 gulls that drifted ashore, and that caused a lot of speculation. I mean, you can see some of the newspaper clippings. I mean, there was a lot of talk about this thing. I mean, what had caused this? There was a lot of speculation in media. What could have caused this? So either it was thought that it was either probably bycatch, or it was related to the aquaculture. And it was really fun because we got these sort of off-the-record telephones and emails where people were like, yeah, I know that bycatch can happen in aquaculture, but nobody wanted to stand out with information on it. So we were a bit sort of, we didn't know. But fortunately this time we were a bit more prepared, both through the Norwegian Bycatch project and through CPOP, which is a monitoring and mapping program for seabirds. So we have this mass mortality mobilization now, so when a lot of birds die, we try to collect these birds to find out what killed the birds. And in 2017 we had this in place, so we could actually go out there and we collected 35 birds for necropsies to try to investigate what the cause could be of this die-off. We got these birds to the lab in Nina for necropsies to identify the cause of death. The material was dominated by herring gulls, followed by great backpack gulls and glaucous gulls, and it was primarily adult birds that were found dead. What we saw was that all the birds were in really good conditions. I mean, I've done about 10 years of necropsies, and I've never seen anything so rolling fat as these herring gulls. So, I mean, it was probably not starvation. We didn't find any consistent lesions indicating any trauma, intoxication, or infection as cause of death. I mean, in this time, I guess avian influenza is something that's really in the top of the mind of people, but we didn't find any indication of that either, that it could be related to disease. What we did find was that there was a lot of blood-tinged watery fluid in the lungs and the bronchi and of the birds. As you can see where the arrows are pointing, like we found water in the lungs. And these findings are consistent with drowning as a primary cause of death. And when you see it like this, it's most likely an abrupt event where the birds are being dragged down. So, I mean, if you go underwater, you make this huge gasp, like, and you get a lot of water into the lungs. And that's what we saw here. It wasn't sort of a bird lying on the top of the water, getting a bit of water into the lungs and slowly drowning. So it was sort of a primary drowning. So based on this, we thought, yeah, it must be something related to the bycatch. So it's either seine fishery or it's aquaculture. And based on this, we were lucky enough to get funding to start a monitoring of the seine fishery, which we initiated in 2017. Unfortunately, I'm the first bycatch talk, so I didn't put in a lot of things on bycatch because I thought somebody else would talk about it, so you'll get that information later, probably. But bycatch is quite hard to monitor because you have a lot of zero events, nothing happens, no birds are caught, and then suddenly you have an event where quite a lot of birds can get killed by it, so you need a lot of data to get any good estimates on this bycatch. And in addition, getting information on bycatch from fishers which live off the fishery is quite difficult, of course. I mean, they are hesitant to tell the researchers about this. So it's quite difficult to get an idea. But what we tried to do was we did a two-fold thing. We did a monitoring of mass mortality events, so we tried to register, do people find dead birds in the area? And because of all these whales, there's a lot of whale safaris, there's a lot of photographers, so we went actively out and asked, if you observe dead birds, could you please let us know? And if you see more than 10 birds, could you collect them so we can try to do necropsies of them? And in addition, we had a cooperation with the Directorate of Fisheries that have a sailing inspectorate, so they have people out on a vessel in the area, which goes on the boats to measure fish lengths and stuff, and we got them to also look for bycatch of seabirds, and we could use this as a platform. So for the last winters, I've been boarding fishing vessels at sea, and you go up there, you see if there's bycatch, you talk to the captains, and you get information about it, because these people are really, I mean, they know what they're doing, they're really interested, so it's nice when you get up on the boat and actually talk to the people working on the vessel, and they see that I'm not very scary. And I see that they are really well-reflected people, and you can talk about it. So we've gotten quite a lot of information in that way. Some preliminary results, I guess we always say that. But after 5 years of studying this thing, I think we have quite a good idea of the mechanisms and what is happening up there, which is really interesting because 5 years ago we didn't know anything on it. So it's been a really cool process. From monitoring the mass mortality events, we have registered in the 5-6 year period in total 4 mass mortality events. So that's with more than a couple of hundred birds that were washed ashore. And that's sort of what has been reported. We did autopsies or necropsies of another batch of these birds, which showed the same as what I showed previously. In addition, we've gotten numerous reports of 1 to dead gulls. I mean, people just giving a call and say, yeah, I spotted some birds there. From the monitoring of bycatch, we have gotten information of 4 qualitative episodes of observed bycatch with more than 50 gulls reported. And that is normally, photographers on boats that see it. In addition, from these monitoring trips that we've collected, we have 9 trips with bycatch, which gives us a bycatch rate of about 0.36 birds per hole, with a quite big confidence interval. So in conclusion, I mean, bycatch does occur in seine fishery. And what I think is really interesting through this project is that we identified through it beachcast events. So it was the beachcast events that got us on the right guard for this. So I think it's really important to use this information when you have birds washing up at the shore to try to find the cause of it. And I think it can be really important in bycatch work where we don't know so much. It's really episodic. I mean, in per seine fishery, it is either you don't get anything or bam, you can get up to 150 birds in one seine hole. So if the conditions are right or wrong, then you will get a lot of gulls, especially in this bycatch. And there might be specific conditions leading to bycatch. That's something we want to look at onwards. It might be connected to wind wave conditions or opening of new areas. So you suddenly have a lot of birds aggregating in a very small area where this can happen. Or it could be something with the fishing practice. The interesting thing with a lot of this is that when you start looking into it, you have people contacting you about it. And I've also had photographers telling me, oh yeah, I observed something like that. And I actually got a quite interesting footage from a guy doing a documentary, which I'll try to show you. I just thought I'll give you a bit of a warning because it is a bit rough like bycatch is, so yeah. And what we see is that the birds, they connect. They go into the seine. You can see the seine around the birds here. And in the beginning, the seine is open, so the birds can easily get both in and out of it. And then at the stage, the seine closes, and the birds can't get out anymore, and they're caught down in this mass of the herring. Yeah. So you have the birds that are down in this mass of herring, and they can't get out of it. And in this episode, there was like 60 or 70 birds that were just sort of mottled into the herring oil. And couldn't get out. And by the time it's like this, they probably won't survive anymore, even though you throw them out. Yeah, so what now? We've identified this, and it's a potential large scale. We're curious whether it occurs in per seine fishery targeting other species, like gannets might be a victim too. We know that happens other places. And then the big thing is this mitigation measures. I mean, it's a very localized problem in time and space, so can we do something about it? And fortunately, we have just received funding from FOF in Norway to continue monitoring and test out mitigation. So from this fall, we're going to be testing out mitigation methods to try to avoid this problem. And I would, of course, be really happy to talk to anyone here about both the bycatch issues, but also the per seine fishery and these beachcast events during the conference. Yeah. That's it. No problem.
I think we have time for one question, so has anybody got a question? Yeah, maybe the lady in stripy clothes.
Hi, Signe, really interesting talk there. I was just wondering, so 0.36 birds per hole does sound like quite a high bycatch rate, and obviously sort of interesting to hear in a per seine fishery. So I wondered, do you have ideas of mitigation measures that might be suitable for the per seine fleet?
Yeah, I mean, what we know is that, I mean, the fishers are aware of the fishermen. Yeah, they are aware of the problem. So they sometimes make noise. They can do the boat horn to try to scare the birds away from the seine. So, I mean, we're going to try at least sound, but also maybe light, if we can get them to not go into the area. or we could try to do some sort of lines over the top of the purse sign when they start to put it together, because I mean it is sort of that last 10 minutes when they are pulling it together before they start pumping where the problem is, because before that the birds can easily just get out of the sign. So it's a really localized time. So if we can block the entry by putting out some bird lines which work for line fishery, it might. That's sort of the first initial, but I mean we'll start testing this autumn to see what might work, and then we'll do a full scale the year after. So of course I'm really interested in hearing from you guys and others what might work with these birds, because I mean mitigation and bycatch is really difficult for almost all the gear types. Thank you.
So next we have Jorge Pereira, who should be here. Yes. And he's going to talk to us about how well is the Portuguese coast protecting seabirds. And Jorge is based at the University of Coimbra. I don't think I pronounced that correctly. In the Marine and Environmental Sciences Center. It's not this one. Oops. Yeah, okay. So we have the wrong one. It's not the right order.
That's all right. Oh, yeah, okay. Hang on.
Perfect. Thank you.
So, good morning. I'm going to talk about a bit of the work we are doing in southern Portugal, especially the work related with seabird fishing interactions and bycatch. So, overfishing, discards, and bycatch are major threats to seabird species and populations, and it is estimated that approximately 10% of the global catch is discarded, and this could change the foraging behavior and diet of seabird populations and species, which ultimately will increase the bycatch and drive the bycatch risk. In central Portugal, yellow-leg gulls and lesser black gulls are the species that interact more with fishing vessels. However, are the northern gannets that are the most bycatch species. Regarding the fishing gear, are purse seiners that are the most the fishing gear that seabirds interact more, though are the long liners with the higher bycatch rate. With this, in long lines, the bycatch in long lines occurs mostly within a special protected area that is designed, or that was designed to protect the aforementioned species. So this kind of issue, we have some kind of conservation concerns and management concerns also. So our study, the overall aim is to study seabird fish interactions and bycatch in southern Portugal. More specifically, we want to look to which species are more likely to interact with fishing vessels, what are the drivers of those interactions, and also how anthropogenic food resources can shape the foraging behavior and of breeding seabirds in southern Portugal. For this, we use at-sea surveys during from 2020 to 22 aboard of 4 small coastal gillnet fishing vessels. We have 144 daily fishing trips and 333 fishing sets, in which we recorded the number of seabirds interacting with fishing vessels, but also the total catch of each fishing vessel, but also the bycatch. In addition, during this year, we conducted some food limitation trials, and for this we tracked 15 Alvin gulls and 15 yellow-leg gulls before and during a 10 period time of food limitation trials. Shortly, we used trained hawks in the closest and also the biggest landfill in the southern Portugal and the closest to the breeding colony in order to scare the birds, mostly gulls, from the landfill. But also we asked to the captains of the larger fishing vessels that we also expect that produce larger amounts of fishery discards to do not discard the fishing during discard the fish during fishing operations, but to discard it during movement or nearby the fishing harbor. Overall, yellow-leg gulls and lesser blackback gulls were the most the species that interacted more with fishing vessels, almost 80%. Followed by Alvin gulls, northern gannets, and Cornish water. As expected, during the interaction of those seabirds, particularly the three major species that attended fishing vessels, were during hauling operations, most likely because the fish was available when the fishermen are pulling the nets from fishing to the boat. And to support this, we found a correlation between the number of gulls, namely lesser blackback gulls and yellow-leg gulls, but also Alvin gulls, with the total fishery catch. So here we can hypothesize that our gulls can forage in association with fishing vessels, like foraging opportunities during fishing catch. But also they can rely on fishery discards. Regarding the food limitation trials, we can see that during the trials, Alvin gulls increase much more the foraging effort, most likely because the fishing discards were not accessible or available, so they have to increase foraging effort to search for their natural prey, that is epipelagic fish. And we know that the trials could have some effect on this species because on Mediterranean, Alvin gulls are highly specialized on feeding upon discards. Regarding the yellow-leg gulls, before trials, we can see that yellow-leg gulls target repeatedly the landfill, the biggest landfill in the southern Portugal and the most near the colony. And during the trials, when we added the hawks, the contract and trained hawks on the landfill, they never use that landfill. In addition, before trials, yellow-leg gulls used much more the at sea area and made some excursions at sea, possibly to follow fishing vessels and prey on fishery discards. During trials, you can look closer, and on land near shore, you can see that yellow-leg gulls started to forage repeatedly on a small site near the coast, which is a fishing harbor. So we can hypothesize that that could be some sort of effect of the trials, because most of the fishing vessels discarded the fish on the fishing harbors, so yellow-leg gulls could be feeding on the fishery discards on the fishing harbors. To study the diet, we have a multi-dimensional scaling analysis. non-metric multidimensional scaling analysis, which the first axis will separate the species, yellow-leg gulls and Alduin gulls, and the second axis, will separate the trial effect, so the discarding and non-discarding effect. Regarding yellow-leg gulls, before trials, yellow-leg gulls were closely related with refuse, and during trials, they were more closely related with crustaceans and to blue whiting, which is often a discarded species. So the information on diet can maybe support the tracking analysis that yellow-leg gulls could feed or fed on fishery discards like blue whiting on the fishing harbors that they target repeatedly. Alduin gulls, before the trials, the food limitation trials, fed or were closely related in the diet with garfish and Atlantic saury. So they are usually discarded species. So we can confirm that these species before the trials were most likely to target fisheries discards with diet information. Specifically, the results from the binomial general linear models. We do not have any effect on Alduin gulls. However, regarding yellow-leg gulls, they increase the consumption of refuse and the presence of refuse in the diet during the trials. Of crustaceans, during the trials, which could suggest that facing the low availability of discards at sea, and these species could target other species and try to find some alternative ways to search and feed on other prey, like epipelagic crustaceans. In terms of refuse, they decrease the consumption of refuse in their diet, most likely because, as we saw in the tracking analysis, they never forage in the landfill. So we expected that during the trials, the consumption of refuse was much lower before the trials. So, as a conclusion, our results show some strong influence of small and coastal gillnet fisheries on gulls in southern Portugal. GPS tracking revealed that yellow-leg gulls foraging decisions are most likely shaped by the availability or the accessibility of anthropogenic food resources. And now we are working with fishermen interviews, so we are expecting that Bycatch, we want to study more detail in Bycatch, because the Bycatch on this study was particularly low. During 2 years, we only registered 2 yellow-leg gulls that were entangled in the fishing nets, aboard of fishing nets. And future work with fishermen interviews will allow to study fine scale patterns on Bycatch. In addition, we want to relate with the diet and the tracking analysis with the physiological and breeding parameters to quantify the consequences of such foraging decisions in terms of individuals' fitness, but also in the demography. So, thank you for your attention, and any questions?
Thanks very much, Jorge. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, at the back.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I was wondering, how did you select the fishing vessels that participated in the study? That it was through volunteering of the captains, or it was through regulations? Just because of what you were saying about this super low number of bycatch that you found, maybe was just also like the fishermen that said yes to this study were particularly good at not bycatching.
Yeah, so more than 50% of the fishing fleet in southern Portugal it's mostly gillnet fisheries. So the University of Algarve, that is in the southern Portugal, was closely related and worked the past few years ago with some of the largest fishing vessels, and they were done great work to talk with the captains and to establish that 10 period of non-discarding at sea, or at least on high sea.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? I have a question, actually. I was wondering, how cooperative did you find the fishermen when you were doing the study with them? And when you do the questionnaires and the interviews, do you find that they're willing to talk to you, or?
In the beginning, yes, but we have now in our database, I don't know, near 1,000 interviews. And in the beginning, the fishermen were very keen to respond to the questions, but at a certain stage, we have to give some things to stimulate the interviews. So
yeah, sounds about right. Is that good? Thanks very much. That was great. Thanks. So now we have Vitor Paiva, is that right? From the University of Coimbra. I've learned that one now. Who's going to talk to us about conservation implications of seasonal and interannual seabird fishery interactions within the Cabo Verde archipelago. So let's see if I can get this thing out this side.
So thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to present this work. This is a work made by several teams in Cabo Verde, especially since 2017, with the funding of MAVA Foundation and coordination of BirdLife International, BirdLife Africa more specifically. So we know that seabirds can be monitors or sentinels of changes in fish stocks, fishing activity also, fishing distribution and effort, and also the overall health of marine ecosystems. We know that they are used several times as umbrella species for biodiversity hotspots. In terms of interaction with fisheries, we also know that they compete with fisheries for some target species, dependent on the seabird species. They take advantage of the discards, the overabundant fishing resource, food resource, but with low nutritional levels several times. And unfortunately, they got bycatched several times in fishing years, like we are talking about. This type of work, estimating bycatch in several regions, has been made in most areas of the globe, but tropical areas, there's a scarce of information in several tropical areas. So we also started working in Cabo Verde, ESET especially, within the Cabo Verde Islands, because we had no sense of which seabird species interacted more with fisheries and in which areas or which fishing methods. So we first conducted some questionnaires with the fishermen between 2017 and 22. 26 fishing ports were targeted, 7 islands of the archipelago, so lots of inquiries being made. And we were able to characterize which species interacted more with these two types of fishing methods that occur in the Cabo Verde archipelago: artisanal vessels, very small vessels with a small motor, and semi-industrial vessels, a bit bigger, but not huge or industrial vessels. So brown boobies, red-billed tropic birds, and especially Cape Verde shearwaters, the endemic species, interacted more with both semi-industrial and artisanal vessels when compared to the other seabird species, so Cape Verde shearwater, Cape Verde petrel, etc. Okay? In terms of which method drove those interactions and probability of likelihood of bycatch, The frequency of occurrence was higher for longliners, but especially for hand line. So the artisanal method of having like a small long line handled by the fishermen, okay? Both for artisanal and semi-industrial vessels. When we ran some models on zero-inflated models estimating the bycatch probability, we saw that Cape Verde shearwaters were by far the species interacted more with fisheries and higher bycatch probability. Also brown boobies and red-billed tropic birds, but a bit slower in the effect, lower in the effect, and especially hand line combined with these species were more likely to originate bycatch of these seabird species. We also had some data on breeding monitoring, so in this case the chick growth parameters and measurements for Cape Verde shearwaters chicks since 2013. So we looked into this in relation to the landings of the main predator species and pelagic fish, and we saw that we were expecting what, but it was a good indicator of when you had more tuna landed in the fishing ports or small pelagic fish especially, you had more linear growth rate of the chicks or a syntactic mass before fledging of these chicks. So having this into account, this characterization, we basically started to look into spatio-temporal occurrence of seabirds and fisheries to see which fishing method was conducted to these interactions at sea. So we deployed several GPS loggers, and this is related also to the work of Sara Saldanha. Some of the data was collected by her. Lots of other colleagues and staff from local NGOs. And especially for these 4 seabird species, the Cape Verde shearwater, brown and red-footed boobies, and red-billed tropic birds, because those were the species interacting more with fisheries. So in terms of distribution, Cape Verde shearwater have a very distinct pattern. So during incubation, they target mostly the west coast of Africa. During long trips, on the incubation shifts, alternating between the pair. And then during chick rearing, they stay much more closer and within the archipelago and target those places, those upwelling areas less often. Red-billed tropic birds, like Sarah showed, have a more looping pattern, a more dispersed and a bit random, so to say. Of course, during incubation, a bit more far away from the colonies, and then during chick rearing, more close to the colonies. Different colors are different colonies. Sorry, I didn't say that. So we had lots of data to look into. And then brown boobies and red-footed boobies are much more coastal when compared to the former species, so they could be indicators of interactions with coastal fisheries mostly. Red-footed boobies are not breeding in the archipelago, but they are staying there mostly, we think, for molting, so they stay there during the non-breeding period, and we were able to target and to track them. Sorry. We also deployed contemporaneously some GPS loggers on the fishing vessels, like I said, artisanal and semi-industrial, and this is just an example of the semi-industrial distribution. The artisanal is much more coastal. These ones can go around the archipelago much more, and these are just few vessels represented here. And we extracted some data from the Global Fishing Watch site and initiative, so in terms of distribution of longliners, trawlers, and porciners in the archipelago. So we developed some methods to see which directions the bird were selecting. So we used the animal movement tools package to basically generate random steps for each of the fix collected by the GPS. We then extracted the daily fishing effort at each of those foraging steps, both for the industrial, semi-industrial, and artisanal fisheries. I developed some GLM, generally linear mixed models, to test the probability of this seabird to follow a specific path in relation to the fishing effort of, like I said, industrial fisheries, semi-industrial, and artisanal fisheries. And these are just some of the results. So basically, Cape Verde shearwaters interacted more with the semi-industrial, or reacted to the distribution of semi-industrial and artisanal fisheries, especially artisanal, like you see on the coefficient value, but also with the industrial longliners occurring in the area, both during incubation and during chick rearing. Red-billed tropic birds were interacting more with artisanal fisheries, both during incubation and chick rearing, and a bit with longliners during the chick rearing period. While brown boobies that were just attracted during the chick rearing interacted more or reacted more to the distribution of artisanal, semi-industrial fishing vessels, and then a bit to the distribution of longliners. Red-footed boobies reacted mostly to the distribution of artisanal fisheries, and this is obviously related with more coastal distribution of these last two species. So, to end or to wrap up the information, we can say that artisanal fisheries, and especially the hand-line fishing method, seems to potentiate these seabird fishery interactions and bycatch. Although industrial fisheries, to be truth, are not high in terms of number of fishing boats operating in the area, so we don't know exactly the impact of these industrial fisheries. Cape Verde waters were the species with higher bycatch probability. We had some anecdotal information on these, and this was confirmed by this bit of large-scale study, so we have to look into this in more depth. And there was a higher likelihood of these seabird fishing interactions to occur during chick rearing period, obviously because they are more coastal and close to the colonies, etc., to feed the chick frequently, like everyone knows. Some mitigation measures are in place, and this is just an overview of what is being made and implemented for the future. So, Projeto Biodiversidade, for instance, in Sal and Biosphere in São Vicente are testing blue-dyed bait, have been tested and continue to reduce this bycatch probability on hand-line fishing methods, these artisanal fisheries. And also, very recently, fortunately, a fisheries observers program was put in place on Cape Verde Islands with the government of Cape Verde. First, funded by MAVA Foundation and coordinated by BirdLife on the BirdLife mitigation bycatch on the West Africa. But then the government will keep funding this. And these two major NGOs in Cabo Verde are also the ones responsible to articulate these and to find people to work on this. Okay, Biosphere and Projeto Vitor. So just to end, thanks to the funding institutions of this project, and then huge amount of partners that help to collect all this data, and we are still processing the data to come with academic outputs on this work. And thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Do we have any questions for Vitor? Yes, down here.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I was just wondering, what gear types do the artisanal fisheries tend to use in that area, please?
Well, artisanal fisheries is mostly hand-line. They can use some nets, but very small nets. The semi-industrial, yes, they can change between, it's like a polyvalent fisheries. They can change a bit of methods. But artisanal fisheries mostly the hand-line and a bit of small nets and fixed nets placed also in place sometimes.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Anyone else? Yep, right at the back. At the very top.
Thanks for a good talk. I was wondering how confident you are in the results you get from the interviews. It's really interesting to see. So do you have some thoughts on the information that you're getting from those interviews?
Yes, actually, like Josh says, occurs the same. So they get a bit tired with time, with the repetition of interviews. But it's true that the work of the NGOs, the local NGOs, these conservation NGOs, are essential because they have very good relations with the fishermen. So they know most of them by name, even families sometimes. So they get in touch and in a relaxed way, they get the perception of the bycatch probability, not only of seabirds, but turtles, sharks, etc. Of course, they are cautious, saying, they would not say that they catch hundred of birds or something like that, but it's also unlikely to happen, especially with the artisanal fisheries. It's very small amount of birds bycaught in each set. So yeah. And some of the NGOs did some preliminary work even before this observers program is in place with the artisanal fisheries. So going with the fishermen and registering a bit of the bycatch on what happens. It's because of that they are, well, testing these blue-dyed baits. It's because of that, yeah.